stage at the Glastonbury Festival and blew away the competition with an intense performance that converted thousands of newcomers to their slow-burning sound, with Yellow becoming the anthem of the festival.
They did a show at Glastonbury quite low on the bill, which was very well received. And then after the actual festival, there's like an off-the-record festival for the Village. And they played that on Michael Eavis's request. And that was like one of the hottest tickets of the year. And that led to the following year's Glasto show, which is generally acknowledged as one of the great shows at that festival. And I mean, that's against some fairly stiff competition.
I used to be at school quite near here, and it was always the thing to aspire to, you know. What can I say? I said it on stage, it was the most important thing we'd ever done, really, so.
They're just a quiet four-piece, essentially, and Chris Martin is a brilliant frontman, but you're not talking about 50-foot lemons descending from the heavens, you know, and people dressed as cartoon cowboys and like the whole Depeche Mode thing of 40-foot screens. That's not what you've got with Coldplay. So what interests me is, in the first instance, how they've been able to go to stages like Glastonbury and captivate. And secondly, can they take that on? Can they go to the States? And can they do the arenas? Or has their live show got to develop into something that doesn't really fit with their personalities and their music?
Returning in 2002, Coldplay had grown in stature and won the hearts of many, with critics and audiences alike agreeing that the band were once again the festival's highlight.
If you headline Glastonbury, then you are an enormous band, full stop. So I'm sure there are kind of venues and gigs they've done around the world that have maybe personally been more gratifying for them, but in terms of like an onlooker, we support, if you headline Glastonbury, then you've arrived and you're kind of here to stay.
My brother was there at that Glastonbury Festival and I was watching it on television, and that was really, that's probably going to become quite famous in Glastonbury history, I think. And you could see he was thoroughly enjoying it, and to have that many people there in those conditions speaks for itself, and it just shows what sort of appetite was there for their music.
At this stage of their career, Coldplay positively oozed self-confidence, maturity and inner strength. Well aware that they hadn't even reached their peak yet, and to see them on stage proved as satisfying for the audience as for the band.
When you first see him, you see him playing the piano, he can come across as a bit of a nutter. Just, you know, all the movements, a bit in the way that David Gray's got his own head movements, Chris has got his own movements, but he just gets so lost in the music. And I think watching someone on stage who is so absorbed in what they're doing and so into it is amazing. And that's what really adds to the amazing atmosphere at their gigs, to be quite honest. But as I say, for someone who's so unassuming in real life, and so quiet and in a way introverted, to see them come alive like that on the stage is just great. He just lives that music, well, he is that music.
Watching Coldplay, just like on that tour we did every night, every single night, was just a really, really emotional, kind of weighty, heavy kind of evening. And I could be absolutely shattered from being on tour or whatever, but I'd always kind of watch the show, and you'd always get buoyed by the crowd who were just completely engaged with the songs, singing their hearts out, and they would lift the band every night, and they'd always perform a really, really emotional kind of like night.
Coldplay's much celebrated videos also helped to push the group into a new wave of exposure and publicity.
The first one that I saw was Yellow, with Chris walking along the beach and singing, and just so powerful in the way that the Verve one was for Bittersweet Symphony, because it was so simple and it doesn't take away from the song. And just to see, I think it's great to see him performing that song, and obviously there were lots of close-ups on the face and the real agony of the song, and it was like, whoa. You know, everyone's now on the Coldplay fan site is always going, which beach was it, Chris? I don't think it really matters. It was just great. He was there, he was performing the song, and it was fantastic. And of course the one that's won all the awards for them, the one that everyone talks about recently from the second album, the Scientist video.
The best Coldplay video, in my opinion, is the Scientist, which is where the whole thing is shot backwards, where he memorised the vocals backwards. And the fact that his girlfriend took her seatbelt off momentarily to take her coat off, something we've all done. and there's this catastrophic consequences with the car crash. And just that sense of the protagonist, i.e. Chris Martin, the boyfriend in that film, as the video goes on, you can see he's like the insanity and the mental breakdown that he's going to suffer, if you like, from losing his partner. And you can see him from the middle of that, wandering around the forest and, you know, broken up, being sucked backwards in time through to a normal person in a car with his girlfriend on a nice day trip. And I thought that was really heartrending and really, really sad concept. And when you actually soundtrack that with The Scientist, which in my opinion is comfortably Coldplay's greatest song, I just thought the package was incredible. And at that moment, I thought this band could achieve pretty much anything they wanted to do.
Having won a Grammy in the US for Best Alternative Music Album for Parachutes on the 26th of August 2002, their second album, A Rush of Blood to the Head, was released for anticipating fans. Martin's vocals are radiant as ever, and the mighty, transcendent The Scientist is unquestionably the finest thing they've recorded in their career so far. The predicted gargantuan sales would propel the group even further into the big league of rock gods like U2 and Radiohead.
When I first heard A Rush of Blood to the Head, which came out in 2002, I was disappointed again because I felt it was too much the other way. Whereas Parachutes have been quite linear and quite an obvious sound, Rush of Blood was very cluttered. The rhythm section was suddenly very complicated, and that was quite a concern for me, just from my own personal point of view, obviously. And I felt that the choice of the single as the first single in my head was not a good choice, because it was kind of an obvious single and I wanted something a bit more experimental. But again, like OK Computer, once you listen to that album 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, which you have to, you really start to understand that it's a masterpiece. And it's like going from Parachutes album number 1 to album number 5, but in 2 albums. I think the progression is that vast. And I think Rush of Blood to the Head makes Parachutes look like just a kid's effort.
Playing like 500 gigs in the last 2 years or something, however many it is, then it makes you better. It makes you better as a band. It makes you tighter as a band. And I think the record's a product of us being on tour for 2 years and listening to loads of different types of music that we hadn't really been exposed to before. And it's a mixture of things that make it different.
To be honest, I expected it to be similar to the first album because that is what Coldplay do. I think things have changed on the album. I think his attitude has changed. Obviously, you know, he was allegedly in love while writing this album, and he seems to have, you know, in his lyrics, he seems to have given himself a break a little bit on a few more of the songs than he did on Parachutes. But it was similar, but it was the same sort of Coldplay thing. I think The Scientist was the first track that I checked out. And again, I just heard it and thought, wow, this has got such great lyrics, such a great hook. And I didn't expect a radically different album because what else are they going to do? It's written from the perspective of a man who writes from his inner soul and about his life. And I think they delivered a great album. I'm interested to see what they do for the third one. But no, it was great. Really enjoyed it.
The Rush of Blood to the Head album was the sort of album that people were going to buy even if they didn't like it, and that's not like a derogatory statement, just because the previous album was so popular. And I remember listening to it the first time and sort of not being able to work out if I was disappointed or not. But like the first record, it was just a grower, and you kind of had like, you know, 4 or 5 listens and saying, ah, I get it. And then when The Scientist came out, I personally think that's their best song. I think it's just an amazing song. And it's kind of very kind of ballad based, and it really suits his singing style, and there's a great video, and everyone could relate to the lyrics.
I think lyrically there's no willingness to tackle sort of bigger issues on something like politics. I think possibly Chris is going to address the issues he's been campaigning about, maybe more in the lyrics, without hopefully falling into some of the sort of campaigning or preachy lyrics that you two were accused of at some point, I think, in their career.
So is it the proverbial difficult second album?
No, this is the proverbial best ever record in the world.